Brothers and sisters of Africa, listeners across the continent and beyond, welcome to Talk of Africa 360. Tonight, we gather at the edge of a moment so powerful, so revolutionary, that the echoes of it are already shaking the world's foundations. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have just done the unthinkable. They have rejected U.S. wheat. They have rejected the chains of dependency, and they have declared to the world that Africa will feed itself. For too long, they told us a lie. They told us that without the West, Africa would collapse. They told us that our soil could not produce enough, that our farmers were too weak, that our lands were too barren, and that our future depended on handouts. But today, three nations have risen like lions and torn that lie to pieces. They have said, no more. No more importing hunger disguised as aid. No more surrendering our dignity for sacks of wheat. No more being treated as a child who cannot grow his own food. My brothers and sisters, this is not just a trade decision, this is a revolution. It is a revolution of the soil, of the farmer, of the African spirit. It is the drumbeat of sovereignty thundering across our fields, our villages, and our cities. Can you feel it? The sound of a continent waking up, the heartbeat of a people who refuse to bow. The West is shocked, their markets are trembling, their analysts are confused. They never imagined that Africa would dare to say enough, but we are saying it loud, we are saying it clear, and we are saying it together. Africa will not be fed by the crumbs of others. Africa will feed itself, and soon Africa will feed the world. So stay with me tonight, because this is bigger than wheat, bigger than trade, bigger than politics. This is the story of Africa's rebirth, and from Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, the flame of sovereignty is spreading. It will not stop until the whole continent is free. This is Talk of Africa 360. Let the world listen. Africa has spoken. Brothers and sisters of Africa, sons and daughters of the Sahel, citizens of a world that is watching with both disbelief and awe, today I stand before you to declare a turning point that will be remembered for generations. A turning point not only for Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, but for all of Africa and for the conscience of humanity. Today, we tell the story of three nations who have dared to do the unthinkable, reject dependency, reject manipulation, and reject the poisoned gifts of empire. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have stood together and said no to U.S. wheat, and in doing so they have lit a fire across this continent, a fire of dignity, self-reliance, and hope. The decision may sound simple, but its meaning is profound. For decades, the United States and its Western allies have used food as a weapon. Wheat, maize, rice, soybeans, all of it flowing into Africa, not as charity, not as trade, but as control. They said it was aid, but in reality it was a leash, a rope tied around our economies, strangling our farmers, suffocating our markets, and ensuring that Africa could never feed itself. Dependency was never an accident. It was strategy, for when you control a people's stomach, you control their minds, their choices, their futures. But the Sahel has risen, Burkina Faso under the bold leadership of Captain Ibrahim, Niger with its courageous stand against foreign puppeteers, and Mali proud and unbowed have joined hands to tell the world, Africa will never again beg for food it can grow. We will never again trade our sovereignty for sacks of subsidized wheat that destroy the livelihoods of our farmers. We will never again allow the illusion of generosity to rob us of the most basic truth that this continent blessed with vast land, fertile soils, abundant water, and a vibrant people has everything it needs to feed itself. Think of it. The United States, with all its power, assumed that Africa would forever remain a dumping ground for surplus crops. They imagined that by shipping cheap wheat into Africa, they could kill our agricultural industries, make us reliant, and then dictate our policies. They thought our leaders would bow, as they have done in the past, under the weight of promises, debts, and threats. But in Ouagadougou, in Niamey, in Bamako, a new spirit has taken root, a spirit that remembers Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and all those who said Africa must be free or nothing at all. Let us be clear, rejecting U.S. wheat is not just an economic decision. It is a declaration of independence. It is a revolution, carried out not with bullets, but with seeds. It is a rejection of the colonial mindset that tells us Africa cannot survive without foreign masters. It is a signal to the farmers in the villages, to the mothers in the markets, to the youth in the cities that their labor, their land, and their vision matter more than all the promises of Washington or Brussels. Do you know why this moment terrifies the West? Because food is the foundation of power. If Africa feeds itself, then Africa frees itself. And if Africa frees itself, then the empire crumbles. The billions they made by exporting their surplus grain will vanish. The influence they wielded by deciding when and how food aid arrives will be gone. The chains they wrapped around our leaders in the name of partnerships will snap, and what remains will be a continent unshackled, standing tall, and ready to take its rightful place in the world. Let us remember, Africa was not always a hungry continent. Our ancestors fed great empires with their own hands. The kingdoms of Mali, Songhai, Ghana, Nubia, these civilizations thrived on agriculture long before the word America was ever spoken. The millet, the sorghum, the yam, the cassava, the plantain, these crops sustained millions without the need for foreign aid. It was colonialism that destroyed our systems, stole our best lands, and imposed cash crops so that Europe and America could grow fat while Africa was left vulnerable. Hunger was engineered, not natural. Dependency was manufactured, not inevitable. And so, when Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali reject U.S. wheat, they are not merely refusing a shipment of grain. They are refusing an entire system of exploitation. They are saying, we will revive our millet, we will plant our sorghum, we will irrigate our valleys, we will harness modern technology and traditional wisdom together. And we will never again allow anyone to dictate what we eat, how we grow, and who we must thank for our survival. This is the spirit of sovereignty, and it is spreading. Already, across Africa, farmers are celebrating. In Senegal, voices are rising. If the Sahel can do it, why not us? In Ghana, citizens are asking, why must we import wheat when our land is rich with maize and cassava? In Kenya, farmers whisper with excitement, the Sahel has shown us the way. This is how revolutions begin, not always with guns, but with courage, with decisions that challenge the very core of empire. But do not be mistaken. The empire will fight back. They will call us reckless. They will say we are starving our people. They will unleash their media to paint images of empty markets, of hungry children, of chaos. They will use every tool of propaganda to convince Africans that we cannot live without them. But the truth is simple. What they fear most is that Africa will finally realize its own strength. What they fear is that when we plant for ourselves, when we trade among ourselves, when we build granaries, irrigation systems, and food industries that belong to us, their power dissolves into dust. And what of the United States itself? Let us look at their hypocrisy. They tell us to accept their wheat as charity, yet inside their own country, farmers are paid billions in subsidies to overproduce. When their silos overflow, they do not feed the poor in America. No, they ship it abroad as aid to control nations like ours. They dump cheap wheat into African markets, killing our local bread makers, millers, and farmers. Then they turn around and lecture us about free markets. Is this not hypocrisy? Is this not exploitation wearing the mask of generosity? Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have ripped the mask away. They have said, enough. And with this single word, they have opened a new era for Africa. An era where we do not define ourselves by what is given to us, but by what we build with our own hands. An era where farmers are not beggars but heroes. An era where children will eat bread baked from African grain, not imported leftovers. This moment is bigger than wheat. It is bigger than trade. It is about dignity. It is about whether Africa will forever live as a dependent child or rise as a sovereign adult among the nations of the world. The Sahel has chosen, and now the rest of Africa must choose. This is only the beginning, my brothers and sisters. For if we can feed ourselves, then we can free ourselves in every sector. If we can stand together in agriculture, then we can stand together in energy, in industry, in technology, in defense. If we can say no to U.S. wheat today, then tomorrow we can say no to IMF loans, no to Western sanctions, no to the exploitation of our gold, our oil, our uranium, our diamonds. Each no is a seed, and together they will grow into a forest of African sovereignty that no empire can cut down. So let us not underestimate the courage of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. This was not an easy decision. To reject U.S. wheat is to risk retaliation. It is to invite threats of sanctions, withdrawal of so-called aid, even attempts at destabilization. But true leaders do not bow to fear. True leaders know that no price is too high for freedom. And that is why today, the Sahel stands tall and Africa stands taller with them. The announcement of rejection sent a thunderclap across the world. Newspapers from Washington to Paris, from London to Berlin, carried bold headlines. Financial analysts on Wall Street were left stunned, their screens filled with red as agricultural futures plummeted. For decades, the United States used wheat not only as an export commodity but as a political lever, ensuring that nations remained tethered to its global economic architecture. But the Sahel nations Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali had shattered this illusion. They stood together in an act of defiance that was not simply economic. It was civilizational. It was a declaration of war against hunger, dependency, and neocolonial exploitation. In Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim delivered a statement that echoed beyond the walls of Burkina Faso's capital. His words were sharp, deliberate, and unshakable. For too long, he declared, our people have eaten bread baked in foreign ovens, not knowing the taste of our own soil's harvest. For too long, our children have depended on grains grown thousands of miles away while our own fields lay barren, ignored, abandoned. Today, we reclaim the dignity of our stomachs. We will plant, we will grow, we will feed ourselves. This was no ordinary policy shift. It was a cultural revolution. In Niger, President Abdourahmane Tchiani reinforced the decision with equal fire, proclaiming that Niger's fertile lands along the Niger River would be transformed into breadbaskets not only for Nigerians but for the entire Sahel. No child, he thundered, will go to bed hungry in Niger because of foreign sanctions or the greed of distant corporations. We will till our own land, we will water it with our sweat, and we will reap from it a future that no empire can starve. In Mali, Assimi Goïta added his voice to the chorus of sovereignty. He reminded the world that Mali was once part of great empires, the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire that fed their people with abundance long before ships from Europe crossed the Atlantic. We are not children, Goïta said firmly. We are heirs of greatness. If our ancestors could feed millions without machinery, without imported fertilizer, without foreign loans, then we, with modern tools and the wisdom of both tradition and science, can do more than they ever dreamed. The symbolism of this collective decision cannot be overstated. 3 nations of the Sahel, united under a single vision, telling the West, we do not need you to survive, we do not need you to feed us, we do not need your chains disguised as charity. The decision came at a time when global food insecurity was already rising, when supply chains were disrupted by conflicts and climate crises. The West expected Africa, as usual, to remain dependent, to beg for handouts. Instead, they received rejection. What followed was extraordinary. Local farmers, long ignored and marginalized, suddenly became national heroes. In Burkina Faso, cooperatives began expanding at record speed. Villages that once depended on imported wheat shifted their focus toward indigenous grains. Millet, sorghum, fonio crops better suited to the sales climate, deeply rooted in African heritage. Agronomists worked hand in hand with traditional farmers, combining modern irrigation systems with ancestral wisdom. In Niger, rice cultivation along the riverbanks exploded, supported by state programs that provided seeds and equipment. Mali invested heavily in agricultural universities, teaching a new generation not only how to farm but how to build food sovereignty from soil to marketplace. The West was furious. American agribusiness giants, who saw Africa as their next frontier for dominance, watched billions slip away. Lobbyists flooded Congress, demanding retaliation. The European Union convened emergency sessions, worried that if Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali succeeded, other African nations would follow. Because here lay the true danger, not in the loss of wheat contracts but in the spark of an idea. If Africa could feed itself, then Africa could free itself. If Africa no longer needed Western imports, then sanctions, threats, and aid packages would lose their power. And indeed, the ripple effect began immediately, Ghana announced. A massive investment in cassava processing. Ethiopia unveiled a plan to double teff production within 5 years. Tanzania began exploring regional grain reserves to stabilize prices independent of the dollar. The dominoes were falling, and the Sahel had pushed the first one. Western media scrambled to paint the rejection as a reckless gamble. They predicted famine, chaos, and collapse. These nations, one analyst sneered on a European broadcast, are playing with fire. Without U.S. wheat, millions could starve. But on the ground in Africa, the opposite was true. Farmers were planting with renewed vigor, communities were organizing food cooperatives, and governments were pouring unprecedented resources into agriculture. The fields were alive, buzzing with determination, hope, and pride. In the marketplaces of Ouagadougou, Niamey, and Bamako, mothers spoke with newfound confidence. We no longer fear the ships from America being late, one woman said. We no longer worry about sanctions. We will eat what we grow, and our children will eat from our land. This was dignity, pure and simple, the kind of dignity that could not be bought, sanctioned, or manipulated. As the world watched, Africa's story was being rewritten. It was no longer the tale of poverty and dependency the West had crafted for centuries. It was the story of sovereignty and resistance. It was the story of fields rising against empires, of seeds breaking the chains of domination. And in this story, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali were the protagonists, united, defiant, unstoppable. And now, my friends, we arrive at the heart of this transformation, the conclusion of this monumental decision. What does it mean not only for the Sahel but for all of Africa, and indeed for the world? It means the end of fear. For too long, Africa feared hunger as a weapon. That weapon has been broken. No longer will a diplomat from Washington dictate policy in exchange for food shipments. No longer will an ambassador from Brussels wave the threat of starvation as leverage. The chain has snapped and freedom has rushed in. It means the birth of confidence. Africans are remembering that this land, the richest land on earth, can sustain its people. From the deserts of the Sahel to the lush forests of Central Africa, from the fertile Nile Valley to the Great Lakes, Africa has all it needs. What it lacked was the courage to say no. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have found that courage, and in doing so, they have given it to the rest of the continent. It means a new economic order. When Africa feeds itself, Africa trades differently. It no longer exports raw resources while importing finished goods at inflated prices. It builds industries, creates value, and nourishes its people. The rejection of U.S. wheat is not just an agricultural policy, it is the first stone in the foundation of a new economy built by Africa, for Africa. And it means the revival of dignity. For centuries, Africa has been told it cannot stand without the crutch of the West. Today, it stands. Tomorrow, it will walk. Soon, it will run. And, when it runs, the world will feel the ground shake beneath its feet. So let us conclude with this truth. Africa is not weak. Africa is not dependent. Africa is not poor. Africa is awakening. The Sahel has spoken, and its words are thunder. We will feed ourselves. This is not a dream. It is not a slogan. It is a promise. A promise to the ancestors who built empires. A promise to the children yet unborn. A promise to the continent that has waited too long to rise. And as Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali turn their faces toward the sun, their hands toward the soil, and their hearts toward freedom, the world must prepare for a new Africa, one that kneels before no empire, one that starves under no sanction, one that will never again trade its dignity for a loaf of foreign bread. Africa will feed itself. Africa will free itself. And nothing, not America, not Europe, not any empire on this earth, can stop it. As we close tonight on this historic broadcast, let us pause and reflect on what has truly happened. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have done something many thought impossible. They have rejected dependency. They have rejected exploitation. And they have rejected the illusion that Africa cannot feed itself by saying no to U.S. wheat. They are saying yes to the African farmer. Yes to the African soil, and yes to the African future. This is not just about grain. It is about dignity. It is about a people rising from centuries of dependency and standing tall to declare, we are not beggars at the world's table. We are cultivators of abundance. Tonight, the spirit of Africa whispers to every village, to every farmer, to every young man and woman. The power is in our hands. Look at what this means. A chain has been broken. For decades, they told us without the West we would starve. Yet here we are, planting our own wheat, harvesting our own maize, growing our own rice, and feeding not just ourselves but preparing to feed the world. This decision by Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali is a seed, and from this seed a forest of independence will grow across Africa. So I say to you, let us not stop here. Let every nation, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, join in this march toward food sovereignty. Let every child born in Africa know that their meal does not depend on ships from overseas but on the strength of their own people. Let the world watch in awe, because Africa has decided that the days of hunger, dependency, and manipulation are over. This is our moment, and history will remember it. Africa is feeding itself, and from today forward, Africa will never go hungry again. This is Talk of Africa 360, and I leave you with this call. Rise, Africa, rise, the future is already ours.